Welcome back then folks to day 3, the halfway point in fact, of Special Projects pack number 12, and this time it's a build which I'm fully aware many people will never use. But if you do decide to use it, obviously, I hope you enjoy it. This is something which I've wanted to do for a while, and it's kind of based on a childhood observation of mine, which was that I always thought the Lamborghini Miura looked like it would have made a fantastic rival to the Ford GT40 in racing. And of course a lot of that is just because of the shape, especially to a kid it would have looked that way. And of course they did kind of dip their toe into the idea of a higher performance version with stuff like the SV or the Jota. And this one, if that is the pronunciation on Jota, I can never remember, it might be Yota or something, I think it's Jota. But this one is a fictional build. I was super happy to see a player, and incidentally, even if you don't do this build, I'm going to ask you to give this player some support, because the particular livery that they've done is exactly what I was looking for. I found an image on Google of this car, with this exact livery, which I could find no information about. I'm sure you could do some kind of, Italian plate reference and try and figure out its VIN number or whatever, but at least for my purposes, I wasn't able to find what the car actually was, beyond maybe some Gumball Rally kind of equivalent, maybe something like that. But the point is, this player had done the livery, which was, like I said, exactly what I needed, and it only had 3 likes. It's probably the least liked livery, the least exposure I've ever had on any livery that I've used from another player in a build. And being on the Miura, of course, is part of the reason why, and a lot of people wouldn't know that this is a replica anyway, so even if you don't build the car, I'm going to ask you, if you can, just jump on the link and love bomb the player, because I just love the idea of that giving them such a surge in likes, and they won't necessarily understand where it's from. Somebody might mention the channel, whatever, but either way, I just love that idea. But aside from that, if you do fancy turning your Miura into a race car, which like I said, most people probably won't, but maybe if you want to try something different, this one also does have the wide body, so that's kind of a one-way street there as well, if you do want to fit that one. Then as far as the actual parts though, again, I wanted it to kind of feel like it's in the same realm as a GT40. So it does weigh a little bit less, the horsepower is up around a similar amount, and even its performance is very similar. So I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. And even the point level isn't that crazy, up around 690 on racing tyres, mind you. So as far as the parts, of course, you want your stage 1 weight. I'll just jump into the ultimate section. Yeah, I was pretty sure it didn't have the stage 5 availability anyway for this one. It does have the high lift cams there, though, as you can see. So then as far as the tyres, it has the comforts anyway. Like I said, though, we have upgraded to racing ones. The high lift cams, I believe, are installed as standard there, so you don't need to worry about that with the other ones. Stage 2 weight, power restrictor, and of course ballast. As far as the semi-race stuff, we've got the crank, the fully customised ECU. Of course, that's not exactly period appropriate, but the reason why I did that is because it allows you to have basically a better way of throttling the engine power without affecting it with the power restrictor so much. The restrictor I don't personally like quite as much as the remapped ECU. It's a cleaner way of doing it, which doesn't feel like it's choking the car quite as much. As far as the diff, that is fully customised. I've gone for the fully customised manual box as well. It's slightly lower on points and also has that more authentic old school feel. Stage 3 weight as well. For the rigidity, I have opted not to do that. Like I said before, you could go for it. It does lower the points in the case of this one, as you can see. So it's down to you, really. As far as the racing stuff, we've got the silencer, surprise, surprise, the filter, of course the manifold, the pads and the discs. I've said it before, I'll say it again, doesn't really matter which discs you go for there. You could go for drilled, slotted, you could go for the carbon ceramics. Ceramics, again, aren't exactly period appropriate, but I'll leave it up to you. As far as the clutch and flywheel, that is, of course, racing. Likewise with the suspension, you can't do stage 4 weight. We've got racing hard tyres fitted, and of course the steering angle adapter to improve the cornering. And like I said, for the ultimate section, the high lift cams as well. So, if we jump back into the garage, then of course I can show you what I've actually done. In terms of performance, in terms of spec, 463 horsepower, 880 kilos. So to me that sounds pretty believable. It might be a little bit lighter than perhaps a real version would be, but I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility, given some of the variations that could happen within that kind of era. So we've got the racing hards fitted, of course. As far as the suspension, we've got the ride height on 100mm front and rear. Sounds super high, but if you see it there, it definitely isn't. It just sounds that way. We've got 4 on anti-roll, 30 and 40 for the dampers, 2.85 for the springs, 3 degrees of camber, 0.15 toe out on the front, quite a lot on the rear, 0.40 in, and then as far as the diff, 10, 20 and 20. As far as the transmission, It's actually a slightly wider ratio than you might expect me to do for something like this, but that gives you about like 205, 210 maybe miles an hour-ish of top-end potential, which again sounds about right for that kind of era. As far as the ballast, I've added 38 kilos. Of course, it's not a replica, so you don't necessarily have to do what I've done, but if you want to get the numbers that I've got, if you like the way that looks, for example, then that's what I've done. 38 kilos, I've put that all the way to the front. 4753 isn't too bad for a classic. Many mid-engine or rear-wheel drive, or rear engine, I should say, classics tend to be very biased in that particular direction, so having that closer to a 50-50 is quite good for a classic. The ECU and the restrictor are actually not touched anyway, so what I said basically applies to any time that you have to restrict it. I would always recommend restricting the ECU first rather than the actual power restrictor, like the restrictor plate if you will. There's no downforce to work with, which is kind of a shame. Like I said, it does have the wide body, so at least you do have the wider track and the wider tyres. But downside would have been nice. Of course, you could fit the wing, but the wing looks ridiculous on this car. And I do think it's a bit of a missed opportunity to not allow us to fit the Jota-style bodywork with the big chin lip that sticks out the front of that car. And it does have kind of a weird spoiler, almost like the kind of thing you'd expect to see on a Stratos. And incidentally, this one you will notice if you download the livery has one key difference, and that is that they left the wheels standard, the standard gold ones, whereas I've got, as you can see, the uprated center lock racing wheels. So that's down to you. Depends if you want to swap them or not. To me, it looks more appropriate to the car. And then as far as the parts, you can see everything we've done here. So that's it for the build. That's it for the tune. Now, of course, you want to see what it can do out on the track. Now, speaking to what this car can do, my notes for this one were fairly brief, that it's slightly challenging, and in particular, the main note that I would recommend for the probably 2 or 3 people who will actually ever try to do this on their car, because let's face it, it's not like you can just waste a Miura in this game for most people, not least of which because of the money, but more so because you don't see it come around as often as something that's just in a normal dealership. But if you do, then my recommendation is be careful on the highest of corners. So like if you're going up around 150 plus miles an hour, which this is actually a perfect track to show that here at Spa, the kind of upward snake bends toward the start of the lap, the car can try to kick its tail out. Not exactly surprising to say that about a classic, and the main thing that you do have to bear in mind here is you're running no downforce at all. And one of the key things that the Miura was actually known for in real life is that because it was designed based on an aeroplane wing, but they didn't fully understand what that meant, the front end actually did lift because of that. So this car being challenging to drive, although not immediately something which will endear you to it, is actually strangely appropriate. In terms of performance, it's definitely up there with the GT40. You could actually have a great rivalry between this and the Golf GT40, which I did, last pack or the one before. And for me, it's finally getting around to a build which, to me in real life, would have been so cool if it happened. Even if you just watched it to check out the build and you don't have any plans to do it, or if you just support the player's design. Either way, thanks for stopping by. Of course, check out the other special projects still to come, the 5 to remain, and the 4 which I've already done this week before this one. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, thanks for watching.